So originally this was prepared as a shir for Parshat Noach, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Noach that it is now permissible to eat animals. But it's interesting to take a look at the psukim before the flood. What exactly was the general diet, and what was the relationship between man and animals before the flood? So let's take a look here at source number 1. Anybody care to read? Okay, please, thank you.
Do you want the Hebrew or English?
We'll do the English. If anybody can follow the Hebrew, obviously that's better, but...
God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, and rule over the fish of the sea, the bird of the sky, and every living thing that moves on the earth." God said, "Behold, I have given you to all herbage yielding seed that is on the surface of the entire earth, and every tree that has seed yielding fruit. It shall be yours for food. And to every beast of the earth, to every bird of the sky, and to everything that moves on the earth, within which there is a living soul, every green herb is for food." And it was so. And God saw all that he had.
Right, so that's a cutoff pasuk. Okay, thank you very much. So notice the first pasuk that we read. What is that? How does that describe the relationship between humans and animals? Like, what's the key word that you see? Let's take the English, for example.
And rule over, and subdue.
Right. Okay. Rule over, subdue. Right. Okay. Now, to me, when I read that kind of phrase, it doesn't give me like this connotation of something very violent. It's, you could have a ruler who's merciful. You can have a ruler who honestly does care. If you think of modern Western democracies. So a ruler has so many constraints, and look, maybe people will say I'm naive, but I tend to believe that many of the politicians and rulers do actually care. So it doesn't automatically have to describe some kind of a violent relationship. And then when you take a look at the next two psukim, notice the difference between the diets of humans and animals. Very basically, actually in the English, this translates a little better, because you can very generally say that humans are supposed to eat fruit while animals are supposed to eat vegetables. Right? Take a look at the Hebrew is puri, the fruit, and yerek esev is, so it's translated here as herbs, but you could say vegetables, herbs. It's a different kind of diet. So each like species has their own kind of own diet that was prepared by Kadosh Baruch Hu, and they don't really have to extend into each other's realms. Yeah, you wanted to say something?
It does say, though, Nasak v'chem es kol esav.
Right.
Kol ha'etz asher bo pri.
Right.
So
Right.
Grass and fruit.
Right, I see right, okay, that's a good point. That's a good point. But even in the Hebrew, like I'm not looking at the English right now, but so kol esev zorea zera, right? And here it's yerek esev.
So it's the greens, right?
Right. So it could possibly be describing different kinds of asabim. Either way, you do see like an emphasis on fruit, which is given specifically to humans. Mm-hmm. So there is some kind of inherent connection between humans and fruit. At least at this point in history, they were able to sustain themselves only with that. Yeah.
So were the animals also not carnivorous at this point? Because it doesn't...
That's a very good question. I do not know. Mm-hmm. But as we go through, more and more sources that we'll see like right now, my feeling is that no. Again, I don't know any sources about
There's
this.
no
I don't.
indication in the pasuk that the animals were eating meat either.
Well, it does say
Earlier
that.
at Yosef.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. So that's strengthening the point, right? That God has given them the herbs, and it doesn't say. Meaning, even if at that time, historically, it can be proven that they were carnivorous. So still, you could say that that's like, in a sense, like a perversion. It's not the way it's supposed to be, because God is describing here the way what He has given them to eat. That's an interesting question that I don't know any source about. Okay, so now let's look at the progression that occurred 9 chapters later after the flood. So it already looks like a totally different relationship. So anybody care to read? Source number 2, English. Okay, thank you.
The fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth, and upon every bird of the heavens, in everything that moves on earth, and in all the flesh of the sea. In your hand they are given. Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. Like the green herbage, I have given you everything. But flesh with its soul and its blood you shall not eat. However, your blood, which belongs to your souls, I will demand.
Okay, thank you very much. So, notice the difference between what we read before is subdue. What's the phrase that we use now?
For fear.
Fear, dread. Okay, those, like, I think that that's a clear progression. It's not just rule. It's not just that each one of these, humans and animals has their own place, and they can live harmoniously. And just, look, I happen to have more authority than an animal. Okay, but it's not just that. Now it's already fear and dread. It becomes much more violent, and obviously as we progress to verse number 3 and 4, so that's already, not only progressing towards violent, rather actual violence of being able to eat animals, just like the herbs that were earlier given to them. Okay, so what exactly happened between source number 1 and source number 2? How did this happen?
Oh, the flood.
Right. Okay.
Basically, the land became corrupted.
Right. And so how would this be an outcome of that? I mean, I would think, if to continue that line of thought, the land became corrupted, so it seems like a little weird that what God is doing here is saying, okay, so, the outcome of that is that you should now slaughter animals and eat them. That's, and I didn't say this in the beginning, I should have started out with this, is, to be honest, if I, were not following Torah, if I were just viewed myself as a free agent in the world and I'm, doing whatever I think is rational, there's a very good chance that I would not be eating meat. Because, if I just think of it from a humane standpoint, it's like, wait, what is this? This is very weird. And I went to a slaughterhouse once. It really jars you. It's like, what's going on? And the only justification that I personally can find is, because God said so right here. I'm not saying that the people who don't believe in Torah and eat animals are immoral people. I'm just saying I don't know on an intellectual level what exactly, what's the strongest argument that you can bring up. I'm sure that they have things. It just, I personally can't really think.
Why to eat animals?
Yeah. Why is it morally justifiable?
Evolution, that we're at a certain point in the food chain because we've evolved in such a way that it's most nutritious for our bodies to be able to eat animals, and that it enables us to function to the best of our abilities.
Well, what if I prove to you scientifically that eating humans is extremely beneficial? It has, like
They have.
95% chance of making sure you'll never get cancer. You know what I mean? Like if you continue that line of thought, it's like, everything
There's a
could
general
go.
understanding that that humans have a different moral obligation to other humans, and they
Right.
do to
Okay. So
other
that
former
what?
creatures.
Perfect. We are going to touch upon that in the later sources that we will see. I agree with you, and I don't even think that it's a good kind of argument to get into with people, because maybe they could go to one extreme, and in either way that wouldn't be good. Okay, so. We're going to skip. We're not going to read source number 3, but very generally, what's important for me in source number 3 is in Devarim, right before the Jews are about to enter Israel. So something very important changes as far as the laws of eating animals. Whereas the law was that generally, if one wanted to eat an animal, they had to first take it to the Mishkan, slaughter it there, and only then was it permissible to eat. So basically, all meat eating was connected to some form of worship. Now, when they're entering Israel, so people will be able to slaughter animals in their own homes and eat meat. And so the Torah describes the exact laws that are involved. And there are two important things that the Torah says. One is it refers to it as a ta'ava, which the best literal translation that I can think of for ta'ava is lust. So it's describing some kind of animalistic tendency or desire to eat meat. And very interestingly, there's an important halacha that is taught at the end of this piece, and it says that when you slaughter an animal, in Hebrew a chaya as opposed to a behemah, so you have to cover the blood. You spill the blood upon the earth, and then you cover up the blood. So keep that in mind as we continue to the next sources. Okay, so source number 4, we have here a very interesting story from the Talmud that it's part of describing different things that happened to different sages and the reason that these things happened. So here we're discussing Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, otherwise known as Rebbe. So if anybody cares to read source number 4. No, I'll do it, no problem. Okay, so this is the Gemara in Bava Metzia, 85a. There was a calf that was being brought to the slaughterhouse. It then went and stuck its head under Rebbe's coat, and was crying. Rebbe said to him, "Go, for that is the reason you were created." Hashem said, "For he does not have mercy, I will bring torment upon him." His suffering stopped when the following story occurred. One day, Rebbe's servant was sweeping the house. She found infant mice and had swept them to throw them away. Rebbe said to her, "Leave them, for it says, his mercy is upon all." Hashem said, "Because he has mercy, I will have mercy upon him." Okay, so something very important to understand about this story is that there's a tremendous difference between just regular people and people on the level of Rebbe, where each and every step is looked upon by God in a very severe fashion. Even if something, we think of ourselves, well, that's not a big deal, I do that all the time. So, when we talk about Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, compiled the Mishnah, so that's not just your ordinary individual. Now, we start off here with a story that, what do you guys think of this level of cruelty that the Gemara is discussing? Did he act out cruelty? He just said, "Look, you're a calf, and your supper." That's basically it. What can we? Yeah.
But possibly the issues that to belittle the creature to say that's the only reason for which you were made was so that we can not to say that it's improper to eat the animal, but just that to think that the only reason God made it in the first place was for that.
Interesting. Okay, that's a good point. Meaning, it's possible that one of the uses that man can make of this calf is to eat it, but it can have like a broader purpose. For instance, okay. Anybody else? Any ideas?
Maybe it was the way that he said it. It was
Okay.
like, oh, go. That's why I created
Right.
it. Well, I feel bad, but that's why.
Right.
In some other term.
But that's the way I read it. I mean, if anybody has any other ideas, I'm happy. But that's exactly the way I read it. I'm like, it's not about the actual notion. It's not about anything regarding the content of what he said. It's the way he said it. It's an attitude. And, I think that this is very important in many things that we do in life. It's sort of like, I heard once, and I just remember this right now. I heard a shir by Rav Usher Weiss, who's a very big Talmud Chacham, a rabbi in Ramot, and he said, in the time when the Beit Din was still performing executions, if he would see an executioner who, was all the time like very happy and he loves his job and he's so happy he's being Mekayim the mitzvah or whatever, he said, I'd fire him like that second. There are certain jobs that are not meant to be done with a smile on your face. It's not, it's missing the point. If a person has to be executed, that's sad. I would never want to be in that position of definitely not the person being executed, but definitely not the executioner as well. I think that there are natural outcomes for somebody who takes a life, even if that's exactly what should be done according to the Torah. So we're discussing an attitude. That's extremely important to realize when we discuss the end of this story. What happened? They were about to throw out mice, or more correctly, infant mice, and he said, no, don't throw them away, for Kadosh Baruch Hu has mercy upon all his creations. Is that a halacha? If you find, infant mice in your house, are you supposed to, let's go find them a piece of cheese? I mean, it wouldn't work with my wife. I don't know about anybody sitting here. I doubt that any one of us would tolerate that. But just as we start off by something which is not, downright cruel, but it's a matter of attitude. So Rebbe went to the other extreme and changed his attitude, even towards creatures, that it's totally legitimate to get rid of them. So he said, no, I'm going to, at least this time, I'm going to overcome this this desire to get rid of them and have mercy upon them. And this is totally an aside, but I saw a piece of response by Rav Moshe Feinstein that somebody asked them, is it permissible to kill flies if they're bothering you? So it's interesting that people would ask that kind of question. I think most people don't even think twice before doing that. And he answers something very interesting. He says, I don't have a source for this, but it's better that you can, if flies are bothering you, you can get rid of them, but it's better not to kill them with your bare hands. Rather, spray some kind of spray or get rid of them in a secondary fashion. He says, I don't have a source for this, but I believe that when you go out and kill any organism with your bare hands, that develops some kind of level of cruelty, and you shouldn't do that. So again, it's not just about the actual action, what's permissible and what's not permissible. It's about the attitude. It's about what it really instills within you. Okay, so now the main sources that I'd like us to see are what I took out from the Chazon HaTzimchonut by Rav Kook. It was extremely hard to pick and choose. It's already 4 full pages of a source sheet. So what exactly am I going to bring? So, I tried my best, but if this would inspire any one of you to continue and try to go through the entire text, if it interests you and you'd like my help with that, I definitely would be happy to do so. So this is just, giving us a general sense of Rav Kook's outlook on this, but it's definitely worthwhile to try to go through the entire text and get a more wholesome picture of this. Okay, so let's start off source number 6. Let's start with the first paragraph in English. Yeah, please.
Indeed, after humanity has become weak due to its moral collapse, it is appropriate to eat meat. Thus it is clear that permission to eat meat was granted after the flood was inherently structured such that it will not apply forever. For how can an enlightened and respectful moral level pass away after it has already been reached once? Rather, the fact is that the divine wisdom realized that man has morally fallen, and until he can come to the blissful and enlightened time when he will reach true moral awareness, it is not befitting for him to fully acknowledge the essence of animals.
Thank you very much. So, what's his main claim in this piece? That's a main argument.
How we became weak after we became corrupted.
Right.
Because we became weak.
So eating meat is a crutch. It's an outcome of us, as humanity being weak. Okay, so eating meat, he'll explain later on. So I don't want to go into before we actually read it that what is the function of this crutch? But eating meat is a crutch, and he says, okay, oftentimes when people use a crutch for too long, so they get used to it and they think that that's normal. That's just the way life is. And he says, don't forget, no, that's not normal. It's not normal to eat animals. It doesn't make sense. We have to do it today. I'm not saying like each individual, but humanity as a whole has to do it for reasons that he will describe in a minute. But it's not normal, it's not natural, and it will change. To me, that's the main argument that he's making here. It's not that, okay, something happened in history and then it changed and it's going to be that way forever. No, it changed once, but it will go back to the natural state. Because look at his argument. How could it be that humanity was once at a level at which it did not eat animals, and then it went down, and even when the world will be fully corrected and everything is going to be wonderful and blissful, so we're not going to go back to that level? That doesn't make sense, because that would not be a full correction to where the world has come. If you say that we're now in the process of correcting the world, so that means that we should reach at least the original level at which man was before original sin. So, if Adam and Chava did not eat animals, so too, in time, we will not be eating animals. So that's an extremely important argument. Yes, please.
But we weren't allowed to eat animals right after they left Gan Eden. It was after the flood. It wasn't necessarily directly connected to their descent in moral level.
So it was right after the flood.
Right.
Okay. So how do you think it's just random?
No, I thought it was that because Noah saved all the animals, now he has more permission to do what he wants with them.
So you view it more as being sort of like a reward for taking care of them? And that's interesting.
Or like a consequence.
When we got kicked out of Gan Eden, the animals didn't get lowered except for the snake. Only Adam and Chava and the snake did.
So you're saying after the Mabul they got lowered?
Yeah, remember, the animals became corrupted too.
Right.
And the people became corrupted.
But they weren't able to eat the meat until after the flood. So the animals that were on the table are the good ones.
Not necessarily. Noah didn't choose good ones. He just chose 7 kosher ones and or many non-kosher
Well, he
ones.
chose ones that hadn't sinned, if I recall, that had
Oh,
ones
did he?
that hadn't sinned.
So then why directly after the flood was the time? Because there's all this time after, they sinned that they weren't allowed to.
Okay, so that's a good question. I don't know any specific source about that. The way I view it is that the world is, starting a new page, where we're starting off from the beginning, and right after the flood, it was like, in a sense, like a micro creation. Humanity is starting over again, and God is saying, okay, I tried giving you the world to handle in the ideal fashion, and everything went haywire. And now we have to use this certain crutch in order for humankind, for mankind to progress and reach the full correction after a long process. So it's, I guess, obviously all of these things are very hard to describe, like a Kadosh Baruch Hu looking back and thinking, and that's the way the Torah describes it, but, obviously that's just in order for us to sort of get a sense of what's going on. So I think, the flood marked the transition from the old world to the new world, and in the new world we need this crutch. It's inevitable. Okay, so let's see the second paragraph here. And Rav Kook here will explain the actual function of this crutch that we have described. So there is no doubt, it's the second paragraph in source number 6. There is no doubt that if killing animals were forbidden by religion and morality, so that's going back to morality. Okay, he's detaching that from religion. He's saying even people who are not religious but are moral and understand that they have certain standards of morality. It would have caused many problems. The desire to eat meat would have overcome people, and then it would not differentiate between human and animal flesh. Because even to eat animal flesh, one would have to break the law and obtain it criminally, and would become common to kill people in order to eat them. Eating human flesh would have been so natural that in no way would it be so appalling as it naturally is today in the eyes of correct people. Okay, so Rav Kook is challenging the most basic notions and feelings that we have today. And what we feel that is, it's innate, eating human beings, that's so appalling. And he's saying, don't take that for granted. Understand. If we had attempted to live in the new world that we just described, just like in the old world, what would happen is that it would be even worse than before the flood. People would end up, when you say everything is forbidden, so then once I'm doing something which is illegal, so let's do it the right way, okay? I'm not a thief. If I were a thief, at least I'd like to think of myself as not somebody who's picking up something for $1.50 in some drugstore. Rather, the guy who breaks into the greatest safe in the world and steals millions. At least if I'm going to be a criminal, if I'm going to sin, enjoy it, do something that's worthwhile. So that's sort of just like an example of if people felt that they have this uncontrollable desire to eat meat, and everything is forbidden. So at least let's go. If I overheard you before saying that there is research that human flesh has its benefits. So at least do it the right way.
I'm inclined to question that for two reasons. One of which is that there are in fact societies of humans where eating meat is not allowed. Like, for example, in sects of Hinduism, for example, there are cities in India where it is absolutely illegal to bring in meat. You do not find a mass spree of cannibalism there.
Right. So okay. Good point.
Also,
okay, I'll take your second point.
And also my second point is that even in the animal world, well, you do see it among rare species where they'll eat their own type of many species, that is not typically found. For example, we once visited a farm where they instructed us to give the chickens all the scraps of our food except of chicken. If we were eating chicken, we would not give it to the chickens because that would sort of gross them out.
Really?
That
I mean, I was once in...
chickens aren't, generally, they don't eat chicken.
Really? I mean, I was in a slaughterhouse once up north in Israel, and they told us that the scraps are taken, grinded and fed back to the turkeys.
Yeah, that's how mad cow disease came about. Because they were feeding cows to other cows.
Maybe it's different. Maybe different species have different standards there. But I do know
It could also be that it's after it's grinded,
or
it's
if
different.
they hide it enough, hide the flavor enough. But the point is,
Right.
in most species,
You're saying that innately they will not eat.
So there'd be no
their
inherent
kind.
reason to assume that humans would do so. They said, aside from the fact that we actually have evidence of societies where they are not permitted to eat meat of any type,
Right.
or even
Okay.
fish, and yet you don't see mass sprees of cannibalism.
Right. So what I'd say to that is that you're looking at this thousands of years after this after Kadosh Baruch Hu came and said that man should eat animals. The way I understand Rav Kook is that he's saying, look, Kadosh Baruch Hu said that this is the way the world should be now. Mm-hmm. And over time, that had the effect and the impact over humanity as a whole that, eating human beings is really, out of the question. Again, you do find certain small groups of cannibals, but that's definitely not, widely spread. And it could very well be that when you find these people who are, vegetarians for centuries, and you say, wow, these people are totally moral, that's because of the general effect that all of mankind had. It's just like I wouldn't look at it on the individual level and say, wait, my best friend is a vegetarian. Am I supposed to, not spend too much time alone with that friend?
That's why I was looking at it on a societal level, where you have an entire
right.
society.
So I'm taking it a step higher than just societies, rather, humankind as a whole.
Because you can argue that one individual would have would have more of a moral sense, let's say. But if you're dealing with the whole society, you're dealing with both, let's say, particularly moral individuals of the society and the not so moral individuals of the society.
Right.
But yeah,
but there still is an effect from other societies upon them. You're always influenced, and that would be a great anthropological research to try to find out how did the cannibal societies develop. It would be I just like a hunch because of what Rav Kook is saying, is that these societies were societies that were, totally sequestered and had no contact with the rest of humanity, and therefore they developed in a certain way. I mean, I'm just throwing that out. I have no idea, but that would be an interesting thing to look into. Yeah.
The only thing that it's confusing for me is, from what Rav Kook's saying, it makes sense to say that there wouldn't be a prohibition on eating meat. He's explained that fairly well, but why would we then have a requirement to eat meat? Specifically talking about Korban Pesach, and that's actually karet, not to.
Okay, very good, very good. That really leads us into the next piece. But just going back to source number 3, which we did not read, so we might want to just skim through it. So source number 3 reads. Let's just see. You know what? Let's just see 21. Okay. Source number 3, verse 21. If the place where Hashem your God will choose to place his name will be far from you, you may slaughter from your cattle and your flocks that Hashem has given you, and have commanded you. And you may eat in your cities according to your heart's entire desire. So we talk about may and we talk about desire. The way the Torah states it is that there's no mitzvah to go out and eat meat. If you desire to eat meat, do it this way. Now, you're right that there is a very important mitzvah of korbanot. So how do we deal with that? Okay, so because you asked that, I'm actually going to skip source number 7 at this point and go into source number 8, which discusses exactly that. So do you care to read us source number 8? Okay, thanks.
All sacrifices will cease to exist in the future. And the verse reads, and the offering mincha of Judea and Jerusalem will be pleasant to Hashem. The verse emphasizes the vegetarian offering instead of the sacrifices.
Okay, so please, just 1 second. Okay, so he brings a midrash, which I brought the source. You can keep the source sheets and take a look at the actual midrash. Midrash says that in the future there will be no korbanot. Now we have to understand what that means in the future, because what we are davening for today is that the Beit HaMikdash will be rebuilt and that we will go back and have korbanot, and we're waiting, for the first Pesach that the entire Leila Seder will be revolving around the actual korban and not everything else that we have today, which is wonderful and important. But we should not forget, when we sit on Pesach and we have the Seder, the most important part is missing, which is the Korban Pesach, which is the covenant between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So when he talks about the future, when the Midrash talks about the future, it's talking about the future way past the Yemot HaMashiach, way past the time even that the Beit HaMikdash will be rebuilt. It's like a very distant time. And he says there will be sacrifices, but they will be the vegetarian offerings. Okay, please continue.
Wait, isn't there something that says that we won't have Pesach in the times of Mashiach? Like certain chagim we won't have them anymore, and other fast days will be turned into chagim?
I don't know exactly which source you're referring to, but it could be that it's this source in the Midrash Tanchuma that you're referring to, that yes, at a certain point there won't be any more korbanot. But it
chagim also, that there won't,
could be.
Pesach won't exist anymore, so we won't have that problem.
Could be, but again, even that I would interpret as being an extremely distant future. Definitely, what we are davening for today is to go back to the Beit HaMikdash as it was. What will progress? What will develop from that? Okay, that's I don't think anybody can give a clear answer of the timeline of the way it's supposed to look. Okay, please, if you can continue the source number 8.
And Jewish wisdom, Kabbalah teaches with a silent whisper. In the future, animals will be on the levels of speakers, i.e. people, throughout advancement of the worlds. Who is it that does not grasp that it is incomprehensible that man will take his spiritual offspring, whom he will cultivate and teach, and then slaughter them and pour their blood?
Thank you. So, Rav Kook throws in here a teaching of Kabbalah from the Ari, and says that there's a term of Ilui HaOlamot, the elevation of the worlds. And I wrote here, advancement of the worlds. It's all the same idea that all species will develop and attain a higher spiritual level. So if animals will reach a higher spiritual level, and we'll view them as humans are today, and humans obviously will reach an even higher level. So can you imagine that you are going to take these creatures and help them develop spiritually and teach them and so on, and then go on to eat them? That would be just as jarring as it is today to us to eat human beings. What is it that stops us? I believe, I think that going back to the point I said before, that the only justification that I find to eating animals is because the HaKadosh Baruch Hu said. So I do think that it would be problematic if somebody says to me, the only reason I don't eat humans is because the HaKadosh Baruch Hu said. No. I think that it's important for people to live on a normal, basic level that, I don't harm humans because it's simply immoral. That's important. If you lose that, get some help. But if you do try to rationalize it, so you would reach the conclusion, wait, this is a tremendously spiritual creature standing before me, how can I harm this human being? That's there. Again, it should be instinctive. You shouldn't be thinking of that every second of your life of like, oh my goodness, like I want to punch this guy in the face, but I'm not going to do it just because, he's a spiritual being. But again, if you do try to rationalize it, that's the essence of it. That people are a little bit of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, chelek Eloka mimal. So how can you go ahead and harm them? So if animals are going to reach that level, obviously we will not only not eat them, but we will not be sacrificing them. Because just as we think that human sacrifice is immoral. So I'm going to finish off source number 8. As long as humanity has not yet reached the level at which it is worthy of relating to animals with pure morality, in this situation, sacrificing animals in the appropriate place is not a concession, rather a righteous sacrificial act. So, this is an important point, that's the answer to what you were asking. So how do korbanot fit into this? So what Rav Kook is explaining is, look, if we have this crutch that we have to use for this certain period of time, so then it doesn't make sense to say, okay, you know what, I'm going to use this crutch for my personal desires, to fill up my stomach. When it comes to Kadosh Baruch Hu, no, we're so righteous, we're moral, God forbid we should shed any blood for worship. Saying, no, that doesn't work. Because if you have to do this certain act, and it's like b'diavad, it shouldn't be there, but you have to do it, so at least elevate it and use it as part of worship. Use it in a holy way. If somebody gives the parts of the sacrifice that go on the mizbeach, and then goes ahead and eats the meat, that's an act of holiness that has the potential of possibly saving that person from, the downfalls that can occur while really filling your heart's desires. So at this point, it makes no sense. At this point, like in history, it makes no sense to separate the ability or the permission to eat animals and the mitzvah to sacrifice them. But yes, at a very distant point, we will stop eating them and eventually stop sacrificing them. So I guess, to sum it up at this point, and there's much more to be said, and this is, again, a text that I encourage you all to try to go through at some point, the Chazon HaTzimchonut by Rav Kook. So we see that eating animals was not always around in history. It's not the natural state of humankind. It developed after the flood as an aid to help humanity pull through this phase within history before we reach the full correction of the world. But at some point, it will change. And I didn't go through, I skipped source number 7, but that's just one example that Rav Kook gives. He gives other examples of specific halachot that keep on reminding us of the fact that it really is not natural to eat animals. He talks about the kisui hadam. He talks about many different halachot. That there's so many laws regarding eating meat and milk. He explains that way. It's really beautiful the way he gives so much insight and so much meaning to all these dietary laws that we observe. And he says they all are reminding us that this really is not natural. It shouldn't be that way. But at this point, we're doing it because on a broader perspective, it really actually is strengthening morality and not, God forbid, harming morality.